Glory be to God, Mega Ministries, episode 78, and this is Revelation series chapter 17, and we are almost done. We are in the home stretch. All right, let's get set up here, and we're good to go. All right, we're ready to start. So in the last chapter, remember this one wasn't actually named, but you could call it the wrath of God, the seven bowls, and it talked about what was going to happen. Okay, so the next one is actually called the Great Prostitute. All right, so let's read through this one. One of the seven angels who had poured out the seven bowls came over and spoke to me. Come with me, he said, and I will show you the judgment that is going to come on the great prostitute who rules over many waters. The kings of the world have committed adultery with her, and the people who belong to this world who have been made drunk by the wine of her immorality. So the angel took me in the spirit into the wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that had seven heads and 10 horns, and blasphemies against God were written all over it. The woman, who wore purple and scarlet clothing and beautiful jewelry made of gold and precious gems and pearls. In her hand she held a gold goblet full of obscenities and the impurities of her immorality. A mysterious name was written on her forehead: Babylon the Great, mother of all prostitutes and obscenities in the world. I could see that she was drunk with the blood of God's holy people who were witnesses for Jesus. I stared at her in complete amazement. Why are you so amazed? The angel asked. I will tell you the mystery of this woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns on which she sits. The beast you saw was once alive, but isn't now. And yet he will soon come up out of the bottomless pit and go to eternal destruction. And the people who belong to this world, whose names were not written in the book of life before the world was made, will be amazed at the reappearance of this beast who had died. This calls for a mind with understanding. The 7 heads of the beast represent the 7 hills where the woman rules. They also represent 7 kings. 5 kings have already fallen. The 6th now reigns, and the 7th is yet to come, but his reign will be brief. The scarlet beast that was, but is no longer, is the 8th king. He is like the other 7, and he too is headed for destruction. The 10 horns of the beast are 10 kings who have not yet risen to power. They will be appointed to their kingdoms for one brief moment to reign with the beast. They will all agree to give him their power and authority. Together they will go to war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will defeat them because he is Lord of all lords and King of all kings. And his called and chosen and faithful ones will be with him. Then the angel said to me, the waters where the prostitute is ruling represent masses of people, every nation and language. The scarlet beast and his 10 horns all hate the prostitute. They will strip her naked, eat her flesh, and burn her remains with fire. For God has put a plan into their minds, a plan that will carry out his purposes. They will agree to give their authority to the scarlet beast, and so the words of God will be fulfilled. And this woman you saw in your vision represents the great city that rules over the kings of the world. Okay, so that is a lot. This chapter is a lot. And again, remember, these are, I believe these are analogies. Again, these are not taken literal, but you can take certain things in them and understand different things in them. So the first thing we want to know is one of the 7 angels that poured out the 7 bowls came over and spoke to me. Okay, so the 7 bowls, right? So that was all the wrath of God's people. But obviously, again, these are not in order, right? Because obviously if he's talking about this now and it comes out of the bottomless pit, we're going to read that again. But, that obviously would not be... this would not be after they poured the 7 bowls out. So again, you have to remember these are not in chronological order, essentially. It's giving different things. So he says, "Come with me, and I will show you the judgment that is going to come on the great prostitute." Okay. Again, this is not a literal. This is an analogy right here. And it says, "Who rules over many waters." So it's speaking of an analogy that essentially again, it's someone who rules over many waters. Now, does it mean? Now what we don't understand is, does it mean princes and principalities? Because it says there's princes and principalities that rule in the world, right? Demonic forces in that, okay, that are actually ruling. Obviously, God's in control of everything, but they have rule for now, okay? And it says the kings of the world have committed adultery with her, and the people who belong to this world have been made drunk by the wine of her immorality. Okay, so the kings of the world have committed adultery with her. Okay, so we know what that means, right? And obviously what's going to happen is we're going to see down the road here what's going to happen with them giving the power to her. So we believe that, we believe that this is a analogy, okay? And it says right here, like the people who belong to the world, right? So again, it's either you're of the world or you're of God. Obviously, you want to be of God, but if you're of the world, then who are you? You're with Satan, right? Essentially, you're team Satan, okay? So they've been made drunk by the wine of her immorality, okay? So drunk means that you're doing, again, we all know what drunk means, right? That means it's essentially an analogy saying that you're doing all the sinful things of the world. You're doing all the sinful things of the world. And because you're doing all the sinful things of the world, you're drunk, right? Or you're drunk with immorality. So again, that's an analogy right there. So that it says, "The angel took me in the spirit into the wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns, and blasphemies against God were written all over it." Again, we know this because we saw this in the other chapters, right? It talks about this, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, right? All right. "The woman who wore purple and scarlet clothing and beautiful jewelry made of gold and precious gems and pearls." Okay, again, is this talking about, it's describing a woman wearing jewelry, gold, and all these things? But then again, is it an analogy talking about all the worldly things that we consume, right? All the things of the world that really don't matter, they're worldly things, right? Then it says, "In her hand she held a gold goblet full of obscenities and the impurities of her immorality." Okay, so what are obscenities? Essentially, we know those are what? Swear words, different things like that, okay? And the impurities of her immorality. Well, it talks about in the Bible, in Revelation, it also says, buy gold from me so that you may be purified, right? So what it's talking about, it's not literal gold. It's talking about basically purifying yourself, right? And again, who purifies us? Well, it's Jesus Christ is going to wash us with his blood to purify us, but also in the worldly terms, okay, the Holy Spirit can purify you, right? And what does that mean, purify you? That means, well, he'll remove the things that are problems in your life, right? That you struggle with, addictions, all the things of the world, right? And there's a lot of them. There's so many of them. So that's what that's referring to. And again, immorality, we know that's doing the wrong things, immorality, right? We know that's basically take the filter of God. That's doing the wrong things, not the godly things. Okay? And then it says, "A mysterious name was written on her forehead. Babylon the Great, mother of all prostitutes and obscenities in the world." Okay. Now, Babylon the Great. That could be a name referring to, again, one of the cities that's a great nation, okay? Or it could be talking about princes and principalities. You could take this a couple different ways. But it's interesting how it says, "mother of all prostitutes and obscenities in the world," okay? And again, remember that you don't want to take everything here literal, okay? But what we know is that, keep in mind, anyone can be forgiven of their sins. And before I start going into details here, I want to bring this up because I think it's important, because I know that there's people out there that, they may be, there's people out there that have to do certain jobs, and they might be stuck in that job, maybe not forever. And what the reason why I'm saying this is that you have a way out. You got to pray and cry to Jesus. We all have done things in our lives that we're not proud of, But just a perfect example is that in the Bible, God used Rahab the prostitute, and he used her to hide the spies. And because she did that and was faithful to God, he cleaned her. He cleaned her. Okay? So it's the same thing. No matter what you've done, you do the salvation prayer, you get saved, and you repent of your sins. No matter what you've done, it doesn't matter what you've done, you can be redeemed. Okay? So again, it's talking about prostitutes and then obscenities in the world. Okay, what are obscenities? That's speaking things, right? Okay, and I believe personally, again, there's demonic spirits, which is why you swear. Why you might say swear words, why you may do things. Whether, again, we don't have to call it prostitution, but we could say anything. We call masturbation, pornography, all the things in the world. They're all bad, right? They're all sins, no matter what level they are. They're all sins, right? But obviously, one thing I will say is with obscenities, I know that's a demonic spirit because, like I said, I used to swear all the time. Like every word was an F thing. All the time. That was part of my vocabulary. So I know. Like I said, I know this is a fact. So okay, I could see that she was drunk with the blood of God's holy people who were witnesses for Jesus. Okay, so again, it's referring to her being drunk, right? Which drunk means what? Drunk means that you are essentially drinking so much that you get drunk, right? And you're out of control. That's essentially what that means. So what's it referring to? Drunk with the blood of God's holy people. Who were witnesses for Jesus? Who is that? That's us believers. So essentially, what does that mean? That means whether that's the persecution time or whether, because we have the, demonic spirits and princes and principalities bringing evil in the world, they're doing it on purpose. They're not doing it because, it's fun, but to them it is fun because they know where they're going to go. So they're doing it on purpose. So again, if you look at this like this, whether it's, the persecution that happens and all the different things that are going to happen, that's what it's referring to, the bad things, and they enjoy doing it, so they're drunk off of the blood of God's holy people. Okay. And then this is interesting. He said, I stared at her in complete amazement. So you wonder, like, whether it's a representation that he saw or whatever, or if it's a literal, like a literal demonic spirit, that type of thing, where it's when they talk about princes and principalities, demonic spirits, or whether it's a demonic spirit that he saw and was just like, whoa, what is this thing? You know what I mean? But it says, I stared at her in complete amazement. So obviously, again, we want to glorify God. I don't want to glorify anything, but you could see right here, obviously from what he saw, he was amazed. Now, whether that's because, again, these are demonic spirits or things he's never seen before, and he's like, what is that right there? You know what I mean? Like that, we don't know. It doesn't describe it. Okay? So then he asked him, why are you amazed? The angel asked. And like, think about that right now. Like, let's say you're John. You're probably like, sorry, I didn't mean to be amazed. Like, sorry. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you'd probably be like, sorry, sorry, God, sorry, angel. I didn't, like, sorry. But you probably would be amazed because, again, if you haven't seen those types of things or that type of stuff, not that it's a good thing, but like, think about it. If you haven't seen that, you probably be like, what is that? That's probably how he saw it and was like, whoa, what is that thing? But the angels asked him that, and then it doesn't say what he says. So like, you wonder, like, the angels are like, stop thinking that, or like, God, you know what I mean? Like, you just think in your head, like, what you would be thinking. You'd probably be like, sorry, I didn't mean it, forgive me right now, repent, but it doesn't actually say anything. But just the point that they kept that line in there, complete amazing, that said, why are you so amazed? It just goes to show that, again, we're dealing with an all-powerful God. And again, there's demonic spirits out there. He's more powerful than anything, but the earth is a footstool, But it just goes to show you that the human might not understand these things. We can't comprehend it. So if you would see something like that, you probably would be in amazement because you would just be like, whoa, what is that thing? All right. So he goes, I will tell you the mystery of this woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns on which she sits. Well, we know the beast, right? Because it talks about the beast. The beast came from the bottomless pit, and it's in the other chapters, right? And then she's a representation of what? Whether that's a literal form of prostitution, obscenities that we speak, whether it's, an analogy of different things, we don't know whether it's an analogy of immorality, like all immorality in the world, whatever that, there's so many different immorality things, it doesn't specifically say that. And then right here it says, the beast you saw was once alive, but isn't now. Okay. So again, what's that talking about? It's referring back to where it talks about that there's going to be the false prophet and essentially the antichrist, right? And the devil's going to give, going to make it look like this beast, died and then came back to life. Okay? And that's what it says right here. And yet he will soon come up out of the bottomless pit and go to eternal destruction. What comes out of the bottomless pit? Oh, what's it say? In the previous chapters, it actually spoke of Abaddon or Apollyon the Destroyer, So that, again, I don't know 100%, but I would assume it's repeating what we've seen in the past, and that's what it'd be. And it says this right here. And the people who belong to this world, whose names were not written in the book of life before the world was made, will be amazed at the reappearance of this beast who had died. Again, it tells us this, right? That the beast dies and it comes back to life. Now, if this is a literal thing, then yeah, people are going to be like, whoa. And it says right here, will be amazed. So again, it obviously is going to deceive all the people, because the devil lies. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and he deceives. That's how he does it. He lies. He's a counterfeit. Right? So obviously, whether it's literal or an analogy, they're going to be amazed. Whether it's a person who's in a figure of power, right? And they basically, whether something physically happens to them and they die and then they come back to life. Again, we don't know because it doesn't tell us that. But it's going to be something like that, where that's going to happen. Or if it is a physical beast, people are going to be like, whoa. But again, it just goes to show you, don't worship the beast no matter what you do. Whether it's physical or this is, literal, or it's an analogy based off of something. Okay. This calls for a mind with understanding. Okay, see right there, now it's saying, okay, this calls for a mind with understanding. So this sort of points to the fact that maybe it's meant to be an analogy and represent stuff, because it says this calls for a mind with understanding, which is telling us we need to think about this and look into it. So it says the 7 heads of the beast represents the 7 hills where the woman rules. Okay. And it says they also represent 7 kings. So when we think about this now, from that perspective, we have to think that it's not an actual physical, literal meaning, it's an analogy. So whether it's talking about the kings of different nations, whether it's talking about the princes and principalities, which are demonic spirits bringing evil into the world, that's sort of the gist I get from this, okay? But it also says, let's say, they also represent 7 kings. 5 kings have already fallen. The 6th now reigns, and the 7th is yet to come, but his reign will be brief, okay? And it says the scarlet beast that was, but is no longer, is the 8th king. It says that was no longer. So is that the one that came alive and then, or was dead and then came alive, mysteriously, or, it's a fake thing? He is like the other 7, and he too is headed for destruction. Okay, which we know there's going to be destruction, because we know that, God's all powerful. So of course there's going to be destruction. Okay, the 10 horns of the beast are 10 kings who have not yet risen to power. They will be appointed to their kingdoms for one brief moment to reign with the beast. So again, is this talking about kings that are princes and principalities that are bringing evil into the world? Or is this referring to nations, right? Is it referring to the kings of the nations, whether it's like the president of a country, that type of thing, which probably makes more sense, right? Because it talks about how there's going to be a great battle. That's going to probably happen in Israel, Jerusalem. So a lot of people believe that these could be kings of, or presidents of the different nations around that surrounding area, and that they're going to go to war with Israel, which is obviously not a good idea because of the believers, and that not going to work out well for you, but that's what's going to happen. Okay, they will be appointed to their kingdoms for one brief moment to reign with the beasts. Okay, which again it talks about that they're going to deceive them all, and that they're gonna give the beast their power essentially, or this person who's in charge. Okay, that Satan picked up. They will agree to give him their power and authority. So it says it right there. So if you think about, like, again, if some of the nations of the world said, oh, we're going to become a conglomerate, right? And really it's the devil who's going to put one person in charge of the conglomerate, and that person is going to basically lie and deceive, right? That's what that would be like, okay? Because it says they will all agree to give him their power and authority. And it says together they will go to war against the Lamb, right? So again, if you're going to war against the Lamb, most likely that's going to be in the holy city, right? So, and it talked about the Euphrates River drying up so that the armies could march down against them. So basically, what's going to happen, what a lot of people believe, if this is, and you take this as an analogy, is that they are going to come down. All these nations are going to come down on Israel. Essentially, is what's going to happen. And because of the way they're going to be able to come down on it, all these nations and the kings of the nations believe they're going to be able to destroy Israel, but they have one major problem. And if you look at the poster right there, this is their problem. Okay, you have the Lion of Judah, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross, said it is finished, and the Lamb, and he is right here. It says it. He is Lord of all lords and King of all kings. So, guess what? The king's going to win. Team Jesus, right? So, and his called and chosen and faithful ones will be with him. Again, who's that? That's the believers. So that's what the rapture, okay? That's the rapture. That's going to be us. We're going to be with him. It's going to be awesome. And then it says, then the angel said to me, the waters where the prostitute is ruling represents masses of people of every nation and language. Okay. Again, so what's that mean? The nations, the people, right? The scarlet beast and his 10 horns all hate the prostitute. They will strip her naked, eat her flesh, and burn her remains with fire. Okay. So again, the prostitute is symbolizing certain things, right? But again, they're going to turn on her. Okay? They're going to turn on her. Okay? And it says, for God has put a plan into their minds, a plan that will carry out his purposes. They will agree to give their authority to the scarlet beast. Okay? So, who's the scarlet beast? That's essentially the Satan, right? It's Satan, and then the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit. Okay? And so the words of God will be fulfilled. Okay? And this woman you saw in your vision represents the great city that rules over the kings of the world. Okay. So again, you could take this a couple different ways. You could take this as, just off the top of my head, represents the great cities that rules over the kings of the world. Okay, so again, you could say it's princes and principalities that rule over all the world, demonic forces. You could say that it's a great city that rules over the kings of the world. You could say that, it is the, there's so many different things you could do with this. But again, the main point to this is to understand that whether you take it literally, physically, or whether you say the kings are this or not this or whatever, or the different nations that are going to join in, whether you know them or not, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, again, it's the same thing as the other one. You have to make a choice. You're either Team Jesus or you're Team Satan, right? And you're going to be in trouble if you're Team Satan. So you got to pick Team Jesus, all right? And again, you could look at this in multiple different aspects. You could represent the great city that rules over the kings of the world. Who's the great city? Well, let's look at military power, right? And who rules. You could sit here and say, oh, that's the United States, right? Because a lot of people believe the United States is one of the most powerful places, right? You could say maybe it's China, And we don't know when this is going to happen. This could be down the road. Maybe it's China for all we know, We don't know. But we know that nations are going to give their power and they're going to basically come down. And, there's a lot of people that believe that that's going to happen in Israel. So a lot of people would take it right now, and they've actually, said this, that that essentially the nations are going to be the ones closest to Israel. So it's going to be like, I forget if it's Russia, North Korea, Iran, Turkey, all these different, regions that are close by to them. But we don't know. Again, you could say, what's the great city? Well, a lot of people might right now would say maybe the United States is the great city. Again, you don't know. It's hard to decipher this. But again, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. You could sit here and go through each line and try and figure out exactly what it means. You could take it literal. You could take analogies. At the end of the day, it tells us that essentially power is going to be given to someone, whether that's a physical beast or or like an organization that takes over control of the world, like the world. What do they call it? The New World Order. People have all these different names and conspiracy theories and all that, but whatever. It doesn't really matter, right? Or the one world government or something like that. Whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. Whoever is in charge of that is going to essentially be the Antichrist, and then you're the false prophet and the beast, and they're going to be controlling this person, right? And that's how it's going to come down. So again, another chapter. It's a good one. Some of these ones, like this one, you could take it a couple different ways. So it just depends how you look at it. But we're going to keep rolling on. We are at 17 to 22, and we are almost done. It's just going to keep getting better and better. Take it easy. Have a good night.